I'm going to take a brief look at the climate change in Arctic Norway and what's happening to the species on land. As can be clearly seen from the map, a great deal of Norway lies north of the Arctic Circle. However, this does not mean that it is totally frozen or have vast areas of permafrost. In fact, unless we take the Svalbard archipelago into the equation, most of Norway's permafrost is actually south of the Arctic Circle. Why should that be? Well, as we all know, the warm waters of the North Atlantic Drift, better known as the Gulf Stream, regulate the temperature of the coastal waters all the way up to the Barents Sea. This relatively warm water currently acts as a massive storage heater, which prevents the ocean from freezing and heats the air enough to prevent the coastal land from freezing on a permanent basis. So what would happen if the overall temperature were to rise sufficiently to melt the ice cap in summer, but not high enough that the winter caused the ice to reform? This is one question which is currently causing great debates among scientists who study both climatic science and oceanography. The only conclusion we can currently come to is that we honestly don't know. Theories vary from the obvious that the sea will rise to the less obvious that the lower part of the North Sea will freeze over in winter due to the cold Arctic ice melt deflecting the Gulf Stream south. The shallow waters of the lower North Sea would have insufficient heat stored to prevent this happening. Further north, the heat is retained in the deep waters and it would prevent this happening. An analogy can be drawn with potholes on the roads, which we are all familiar with. The shallow ones freeze much quicker than the deep ones. If you don't believe me, I suggest you go stand beside the A82 in Lochaber on a cold morning. Other theories just give an overall rise in sea temperatures, which would also raise the temperatures on land. In northern Norway, this would raise the height at which permanent snow would be found. It's this last factor that has the greatest bearing on some of Norway's iconic Arctic species. The ptarmigan. This is the grouse of the Arctic. In summer, its plumage enables it to blend in perfectly with its native tundra plants. This allows it to sit and hatch its clutch of eggs unnoticed by avian predators such as falcons, black-backed gulls, and sea eagles. In winter, its white plumage blends perfectly with the snow, making it all but invisible to the eye. But what if there was no snow in the tundra? The ptarmigan's cloak of invisibility would turn into an advert for dinner to both avian predators and land predators such as the Arctic fox. To avoid this, it would have to move to higher ground where hopefully there would still be sufficient snow cover in which to hide. The effects of shifting to higher ground would be benefit to the individual, but to the species as a whole, it could have adverse effects. Firstly, as its overall territory decreases, the overall population able to be sustained will also drop in number. Secondly, if these areas of permanent snow are separated by distances across deep valleys or fjords, the ability for genetic viability will be damaged. This in turn could lead to population collapses in any area which was not large enough to prevent interbreeding. It's highly likely that this species could be lost in Scotland. The muskox, its name in Inuit, is Umingmak, which means the bearded one, and you can see why when you look at it. This is another creature which will suffer badly if the permanent snow goes. Now, this lovable creature is a wolverine, known in Norway as a glutton. Really, it's just a big weasel, a very, very big weasel, with a very, very big appetite. It also has the envious title of having the most powerful bite of any animal alive. The crushing power of its jaws would make a crocodile burst into tears. It can tear the head off an adult reindeer with ease. So what will happen when increasing temperatures enable farmers to rear domestic livestock outside in larger numbers throughout the winter months? Conflict already exists between Sami herders and the wolverine. In some areas of both North Troms and Finnmarken, the sea Sami, who for thousands of years had kept small flocks of their very tough Arctic sheep, are finding it impossible to protect their livestock and have ceased doing so. Increasing conflict will be inevitable, and as its numbers increase with increased food availability, this will lead to pressure from the farming lobby for culling. A similar situation is already in situ regarding the lynx, where once the population in an area exceeds what is acceptable to the herders, the farmer's culling is carried out. A point of interest is that in some regions of Norway, the compensation payments to Sami herders for predator losses are greater than the sales value of their reindeer meat. Strangely enough, no deer ever seem to die of natural causes. Much of what has been said about the ptarmigan can also be said about this animal, for although itself is a predator, it is also a prey species for wolves, lynx and wolverines. These larger predators will also adapt to climate change by altering their territorial range to find prey. But if glacial valleys become warm enough to support year-round livestock grazing, there will undoubtedly be conflict with man, the apex predator. They may look lovable, like a hamster, but believe me, these little guys have attitude to the point of anger management problems. So how will they fare if the snow goes? Unfortunately, probably not so good. The breeding habits of lemmings are seldom witnessed due to the fact they're usually carried out under a deep snowdrift, and it's well documented that the years in which lemmings are at their greatest numerically coincide with the years of heavy snowfall. Another factor against them is that if the snow comes later but goes earlier, they will have to spend more time out in the open feeding. This leaves them exposed to both avian and animal predators for a greater time. Norway currently has a lynx population of between 400 and 500 individuals, spread across the country with the exception of the southwest counties, where it's only encountered on rare occasions. Although it's a fearsome predator in its own right, capable of killing deer up to over 300 pounds in weight, it is in direct competition with the wolverine. Wolverines are known to kill both adult and juvenile lynx, and therefore the lynx tends to avoid areas where wolverine populations are high. Currently its population is regulated by licensed hunting, but if climate change creates a situation where its habitat is reduced due to increased farming, then conflict will undoubtedly occur. Wolves are also a threat to the lynx, not only as predators, but also by forcing lynx off their kills. Wolverine packs will also do this. In winter, the lynx will regularly take large prey, so the availability of unhoused sheep, if winters become milder, will create conflict, particularly in the coastal regions of Troms and Finnmark. Now, the moose, or more properly named elk, is the largest deer alive today. Norway has a population of around 150,000, neighbouring Sweden between 300,000 and 400,000, with Finland's elk population similar to that of Norway. So elk are not that uncommon. Indeed, they are notorious for causing road accidents. However, on the 15th of August 2012, an unfortunate motorist night driving some 230 kilometres north of Oslo swerved to avoid an elk. He missed the elk and he hit a brown bear instead. Driving in Norway can be fun. Incidentally, the brown bear population is around 150 bears. If you want to know the odds on missing an elk and hitting a bear, I suggest you ask a bookmaker, not an ecologist. The diet of this giant deer consists largely of aquatic lichens and mosses. So if climate change dries out the tundra marshes, it will struggle to find food. However, as this creature is very capable of covering great distances, it may just move to regions less affected. This may in turn cause conflict. At present, around 100,000 elk are shot each year in Sweden. This cull would certainly increase if conflict arose between farming interests and elk populations. Now, the wolf in Norway are very rare. The wolf population in Norway is very small and is generally located along the border with Sweden. Most of these wolves actually breed in Sweden, whereas most of Norway's people are very pro-wolf. The vociferous minority of farmers from around the east of the Glomma Valley are most determined to see the demise of these magnificent creatures. In 2013, it was estimated that the resident population was around 25 adults, and the Norwegian government authorised a cull of 12 that winter, which would have left just 13. This is hardly a genetically viable population, yet this number are attributed to killing 1,500 sheep per annum, which means there is either very, very large and very, very hungry wolves, or the farmers were telling tales. The government currently compensates for these losses. If climate change enables the sheep farmers to increase the numbers of sheep on open grazings above the current 2 million, the outlook for the Norwegian wolf is truly bleak. As we've seen, animals and birds may not have it easy if climate change continues at its present rate, but at least they have some leeway by having the ability to move. But if your only ability to move is by throwing your seeds into the wind or shifting your roots, then life can become very tenuous. Many of the rarer Arctic plants, including liverworts and lichens, may not survive. Even if they survive the change in climate, they may not be able to compete against faster growing plants from the temperate zone. But at this moment in time, we really just don't know. However, up in Svalbard, there is evidence that hardy Arctic plants like mountain avens and white Arctic bellheather have managed to survive numerous climatic cycles. Strangely enough, the most frequent source of new plants in Svalbard seems to be from northwestern Russia, which is many hundreds of miles away. Russia is many hundreds of miles from Svalbard, but it is frequently connected to Svalbard by continuous ice during winter. Scientists at UNIS, that's the United Nations University in Svalbard, are of the opinion that this sea ice, combined with the predominant southeasterly winds that are responsible for this seed transfer. But if the sea ice bridge were to vanish due to climate change, we don't really know what would happen. It's thought that initially plants such as mountain avens and highland saxifrage will follow the glacial retreat, but they may eventually run out of room if too much Arctic ice disappears. If this does happen, then areas such as Svalbard may be recolonized by other plants, most likely shrubs such as willows. This in turn will have a cascade effect on both flora and fauna. This ability for mobility displayed by Arctic plants is, however, not applicable to many plants from more temperate or tropical zones. It's for this reason that the global seed vault has been established deep in the permafrost at Longyearbyen and Svalbard. But there is another way that seeds of non-indigenous plants reach Svalbard, and this led to a very strange PhD thesis. One PhD student was sitting at the airport in Svalbard offering to clean everyone who came off the plane's boots, carefully picking out all the earth from people's hiking boots. He then took these into UNIS, where they separated out quite a large number of non-indigenous plant seeds, of which over 40% were able to germinate in Svalbard's current climate. This gives an indication as to the dangers of introducing non-indigenous plants. So we can see from this that the future of wildlife and plant life in the Arctic is very tenuous. Thank you.